In the mid-1800s, the 10 most common surnames in Wales accounted for the names of about 55% of the people. Jones, Williams, Davis, Thomas, Evans, Roberts, Hughes, Lewis, Morgan, or Griffiths. Maybe about 100 surnames in total made up about 90% of the population. But chances are that most of your Welsh ancestors had one of those 10 most common surnames. And what comes with that is that you can't always rely on surnames or even full names to find your ancestors. And sometimes it can even feel impossible when trying to differentiate your people from those who aren't related. The lucky thing with this is that differentiating between people in a community was also a problem in the past. And so people had to come up with ways to differentiate between multiple people in the community who all had the same name. Often, that strategy involved combining people's names with a place name. If we take, for example, my 4 times great-grandmother, Mary Davis, she had an extremely common name. But in the community, she was colloquially referred to as Mariar Velin, or the Mill Mary, because she lived at one of the local mills. This kind of name and place name identifying also happened in the newspapers and the journals, where they give the place name in addition to the person's full name. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to part 1 of a short series on following your ancestors. And today we're going to talk specifically about following the place to help you find your ancestors, and then the process of turning those names, dates, and places into people and stories. Hey everybody, I hope you're having a lovely day today. Welcome to GenealCymru. My name is Di, and here we talk about genealogy and Welsh history. If you're interested in any of that, make sure to hit the subscribe button. The first question we need to consider when doing this is, where do we find place names? I tend to start my searches for place names with the vital statistics records. So think your census, your baptism, your marriage, and your burial. All of these records tend to record some place name. It might be a farm, a street address, a town, or the parish. When you're looking through these records, make sure that you're keeping track of all of the place names that appear. And oftentimes, the more specific place names that you find will be the most helpful to you. So just think about the difference between looking for information on Swansea, which is a whole city, versus looking for information on 14 Maes of Edwin, Cymru Swansea, which is a specific house. But it's not always the case that the most specific place names are the most helpful, so you need to keep in mind a hierarchy of place names. Keep track of the country, the region, the county, the parish, the hamlet, the city, town, or village, the street, and then the farm or street address. All of these place names will come in useful to you in different ways. Just consider the question, where are you from? The answer to that question can vary across time for the same person. If your ancestor moved from Wales to England, they may just answer Wales or just a region in Wales. Or if they moved from rural Wales to urban Wales, they may just name the largest village or town that was closest to where they actually lived. Even think about your own life. If you've moved around to different places, even just for vacation, when asked where you're from, you likely gave different answers. So say that you're looking through the records and writing down all of these different place names. One thing to keep in mind is that spelling will become really important when you're searching with place names. So make sure to keep note of all of the different spellings for each level of this place name hierarchy. There's 3 important reasons that you need to do this. The first one is that spelling was not standardized until relatively recently. Welsh dictionaries have been in development for at least 150 years. Back in the mid-1800s, Daniel Sylvan Evans was working on his Welsh and English dictionaries, and he got to the letter E by the time of his death in 1903. However, when we think about standardized Welsh dictionaries, or in this case, the Geiriadur Prifysgol Cymru, it wasn't completed until 2002. Even in the case of English, the language wasn't standardized until 300 years ago. The second thing to keep in mind is that Wales, Welsh record keeping, and Welsh literature is bilingual. For most of the time period that Welsh genealogists are working with, most of the population only spoke Welsh. However, record keeping was done mostly in English, and if you go far back enough, you might find some Welsh, but you'll eventually find Latin. So, throughout most of this time period of Welsh record keeping, record keepers had to also be translators. So they oftentimes wrote place names in ways that they thought best represented them to an English reader. Many times these spelling changes were really idiosyncratic, but you can also notice some trends across these spelling changes when it comes to accounting for sounds in Welsh that don't exist in English, or the differences between the two alphabets. The final thing to keep in mind is a more recent invention, artificial intelligence. Many of the databases that we search are compiled and transcribed by AI. Sometimes these databases end up having really poor spelling, especially if the AI has trouble reading the scanned article. Here's an example from the National Library of Wales newspapers database. The original record is not the clearest, and when examined by their AI transcription program, you end up with something that looks like this. Some of it's transcribed well, but much of it is just a big jumble of characters. If you were doing a search and you wanted to find this article because it contains information about your ancestors, you could search Sharp and Salford, and you'd find something. But if you were to search Holmes and Albert Street, you would not. You'd have to search for something like Holmer and -VBERT Street to be able to find the specific article. So in the end, you may not ever find this article if you were looking for this Holmes. So with this, we face a lot of challenges when it comes to finding articles about our ancestors, but with the right skills, you can still get amazing finds. And now that I've mentioned the databases, we can talk a bit about where it is that we use these place names to find stories about our ancestors. The major two that I use are the National Library of Wales website, to look through newspapers, journals, wills, and tithe maps. And then the second is Google. And when we're looking through these databases, it's really important that we do our best to work with the search engine, especially now that we know the kind of challenges that we face when making searches for our ancestors. The best way to do this is by using what is called Boolean search terms. And what Boolean search terms are words and symbols that you can add to your searches to give more specific instructions to that search engine about what you want to find. The Boolean search terms that I generally use are quotation marks and and. You can also use things like or, not, or an asterisk. But I don't use those too often, so I'm going to stick to what I know best. And instead of just talking about these search terms and saying a bunch of symbols at you, I'm going to show you how these actually work and what your searches will look like. So if we go to the National Library of Wales newspapers site to do a search, we can do a search for a really common name like David Davis. If you just type in David Davis into the search bar, you will get 2.4 million search results. And you will spend the rest of your life clicking through all 2.4 million results. But what's actually happened here is that the search engine has searched all of the articles and found every instance of David and also every instance of Davis. Now we add in one of these Boolean search terms. We put David Davis in between quotation marks. When you do that, you get 122,000 results. And in this search, you're getting every instance of David Davis with the two words together on the same page. And then finally, we can narrow it down even more by doing what we're talking about in this video, which is following the place. So you put David Davis in between quotation marks and Llanfair Clydogau, which is the name of a parish, also in quotation marks. In this case, you get 276 results, which is far more manageable than the other searches that we did. So by working with the search engine and using these Boolean search terms, we're actually making our research a lot more focused, and we're going to get search results that are much more relevant to what we're looking for. You'll find that a lot of search engines will have these Boolean search terms built into them, and that's generally in the advanced search section. And I almost always will skip directly into the advanced search so that I can do this kind of focusing on my search terms. Using these Boolean search terms is where that hierarchy of place names comes in really helpful. So let's consider a new example. My ancestor Mary Davis, who I mentioned earlier, with the really common name, had a husband named Jacob Davis. I've found in my research that Jacob Davis is a much less common name, so we're going to use that for our purposes today. So you're going to want to pull up your hierarchy of place names. I generally start with the most specific and then move upwards to the more general. Jacob Davis lived at a property called White Mill. For our first search, we'll do Jacob Davis in quotation marks and White Mill in quotation marks. White Mill also has a Welsh name, which is Felyn. Felyn also has an alternate spelling, Felyn. It also has a non-mutated form, Melyn and Melyn. And lastly, it has an anglicized form, Felyn and Felyn. When I'm doing my research, I make sure to do all of these searches, just in case, and so that I can find every possible record that is related to my ancestors. We can also move up the hierarchy of place names to use the village. So, Jacob Davis in quotation marks and Llangeler. And then Llangeler also has an alternate spelling that we also need to search for. We can also do a search with the village if we want to see if there are any other Jacobs in the village. So we can search just Jacob and Llangeler, both spellings. They might be related, they might not be. Who knows, but it's good to find them. We can also do a general search for all of the Jacob Davises in Wales. So I would just put in Jacob Davis in quotation marks. These may also be other relatives. Or it might come up with cases where Llangeler or White Mill or Felyn are just completely mangled by the AI. We may also want to search through the English newspapers. So in that case, I would do Jacob Davis in quotation marks and Wales, or South Wales, or Carmarthenshire. All of these search terms on the hierarchy of place names will find you different sorts of information. One thing to remember when doing this kind of place name search is that there might be multiple places across Wales with the exact same name. In the case of the White Mill, you want to make sure that you're looking at the White Mill in Denbighshire and not the White Mill in Abergwili, which is outside of Carmarthen town, where there's also a Davies family. So just pay attention and make sure that you're getting the right place. Like I said earlier, the other place that I like to do this kind of search is on Google or Google Books. Using a specific place name, like a farm or an address, will often yield really interesting results. There's tons of old books that are out of copyright and that have full copies online for you to read. And sometimes those books contain really interesting bits of local knowledge. You might find something like a parish history from the 19th or 20th centuries, which you can draw from. There were tons of these made, and many of them written in Welsh for submission to the Eisteddfodau, and they include a lot of really specific details that you often can't get anywhere else. So yeah, cast your net widely, and you will surprise yourself with the kind of information that you can end up finding. There's actually more that I want to say about following the place when doing your Welsh genealogy research, but this video is already getting a bit long, so there's going to be a part 2 to this video. And in that video, we're going to talk a bit more about other places that you can go to make these searches using place names. We're also going to talk a bit about different ways that we can focus in on place names as a strategy for finding out more about the lives of our ancestors. So in the comments, let me know about times where place names have been really helpful for you in your research. Also, let me know if you've found any really mangled spellings of the properties that your ancestors lived on. There's been a couple in my family tree that are just very surprising. Let me know because I would love to read it. If you'd like to see more genealogy or Welsh history videos, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. If you'd like to support this channel or get access to exclusive content, check out the Patreon and join the newsletter. You can also follow us on most platforms just by searching GenealCymru.